Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the JHFS Participações conference call for the results of the second quarter 2021. We have with us Tiago Alonso de Oliveira, the CEO, and myself, Mara Boaventura Diaz, the IRO. This presentation will be recorded and all participants will be in listen-only mode. We also have a Libra interpreter to increase the sensitivity in our communications. This event is being broadcast simultaneously via YouTube and webcast, and you can access this at the IR site of JHFS at ri.jhfs.com.br and through the MZIQ platform where the presentation is also available for download. Please pose your questions using Ask the Speaker chart. Any forward-looking statements that may be made during this conference call regarding the company's business prospects, operating and financial projections or goals are based on beliefs and assumptions of the company management, as well as information currently available to the company. These forward-looking statements involve risks, uncertainties, and assumptions, and they depend on circumstances that may or may not occur. Changes in the general economic condition, industry condition, and other operating factors may affect the company's future results and lead to results that differ materially from those expressed in these statements. I will now give the floor to Thiago, who will begin the presentation. You may proceed, Thiago. Well, thank you, Mara, for the presentation. Ala, it is a pleasure to be with you here to help you in the conference call. We're going to have a very quick presentation on the business performance, consolidated results, and Mara and I will help you in the question and answer session. Let us begin with the development throughout the second quarter of this year. We had a growth in sales of 66%, growing 350 million in sales from last year to 560 million this year. We would like to highlight that there was an expansion not only in sales, but a greater distribution between the company projects generating this sales volume. Now, with this, net revenue grew 139%. We got very close to 560 million reais in revenue compared to 234 last year, and adjusted EBITDA went beyond 422 million compared to 166, 167 in the second quarter of last year. Very generally, this was a good quarter in terms of sales. With the beginning of the third quarter, we observe a constant pace as we saw during the second quarter in terms of sales and demand for the development products of JHSF. I would like to highlight that during this period, our revenues reach 442 million. For those who follow up on what will be realized, this is the magnitude that we're referring to. This is revenue that will go through our company in the coming quarters. Accounts receivable, 920 million approximately. Accounts receivable that are indexed to the IPCA, part indexed to the IGPM, as well as other indices, and we have 440 million of accounts receivable, and part of this are pegged to the INCC. With this offering us a good protection in terms of costs for the company as we go forward with a price soar that we have observed in a general way in the market. We go on to the next page, please, where we will look at the indicators for the malls and retail as long with as the digital. We carried out a comparison with 2020 as well as 2019 in terms of the company indicators, which you will see to the bottom left. If we look vis-à-vis 219, which is what stands out more, same store sales, we grew 11.5%, same area sales 9.9, same store rate 8.7, and SAR 9.3%. Now this shows us that despite the fact that in the second semester of 2021, we underwent some months, especially the month of April, with an increase in restrictions. We were able to grow vis-à-vis 2019. That is to say, before the pandemic, when we look at the bottom line where the comparison is with the year 2020, the figures are quite expressive, almost fivefold more than what we observed last year. That is why we think the most appropriate comparison for you should be carried out based on the second quarter of 2019. I would like to highlight that the month of May was better than April, June was better than May, and July ever better than June. So we do observe a significant recovery when it comes to the sales that we observe in our malls. And speaking about sales, at the top of the graph, still to the left, you see the tenant sales vis-à-vis 2019, an increase of 16%. If we compare this to 2020, an increase of 560%, highly expressive figures when compared to the year 2019 and 2020. In terms of net revenue, here we have a comparison compared to the second quarter of 2020. I would like to remind you that since the beginning of the pandemic, JHSF decided not to work with the linearization of the COVID effects. So what you see here in the statement is what in truth is happening. We see a growth of net revenue of almost 480% and a growth of adjusted EBITDA of 450% vis-a-vis last year, which means that we're returning to levels that are closer to what we had in the pre-pandemic period. Of course, despite having some discounts that are selectively granted to our store tenants. Our occupancy rate is 96%. Cidade Jardim and Catarina Mall represent 80% or more than our GLA and our revenue generation. The figures are closer to 100% than the 96% that we observe on average in retail. And digital gross revenue had a growth of 661%, practically 7 times what we have observed in this quarter vis-à-vis the same quarter last year, with a highlight to what we observe in CJ Fashion, 45% growth, Concierge 421%, and CJ Food compared with the first quarter of 21, 28% growth. Therefore, we see that the digital initiatives are moving forward, an advance in the malls, an advance in digital, as well as advance in the digital area. Next page, please. In hospitality and gastronomy, an evolution in the average daily compared to the year 2020, as well as 2019. RevPAR nowadays at the same level at which it was in 2019, 143% higher than our position in the same period last year. With this, we see the net revenue of this division grow sevenfold, 7.5 times, from 5.4 million to 45 million. In terms of number of couverts sold, we're somewhat below the pre-pandemic period, showing that we still have good space to recover. And as I mentioned previously regarding the malls in the month of April, well, May better than April and June being better than May. We observed the same thing in terms of gastronomy as well as in hospitality. So there has been a reconversion in our figures. Average couvert, we observed a growth of almost 20% vis-a-vis the same period last year, despite the growth of 5% when compared to 2019. What we have observed that resulted from the closing of restaurants in earlier schedules was a decrease of the consumption of wine. And of course, this has an impact on the average composition of COVID. When it comes to adjusted EBITDA, we went from minus 12 in the second quarter 20 to a positive 9.2, once again showing the recovery and evolution of this business when the economy became more flexible. Next page, please. When it comes to the International Executive Airport, we had a growth vis-a-vis the first. He corrects himself. The second uh, quarter of 20 of 205 in landings and takes off. This refers to the growing maturity of the airport and the capacity expansion that we had at the end of last year. Now, if we look at the fuel, the growth has already been quite similar, 210%. And in June of 2021, we concluded the internationalization stage of the Sao Paulo Catarina. It is now an airport that is ever more adapted to the needs of executive aviation. Our net revenue grew 86% year on year, and we had some non-recurring extraordinary expenses that brought our EBITDA to zero point 0.8 compared to 1.3 in the second quarter of 2020. We now go on to the next page. With all of this, we see the company's consolidated results, beginning with a growth of net revenue of 162%, 662 million in revenue in the second quarter of this year. Our gross profit grew in line with net revenue, adjusted EBITDA also very much within that growth range, but not in the same amount because we have some expenditures with marketing due to the launch of new products. Now, uh, this ended at the end of the second quarter, but it did have an impact on the balance. And in terms of net revenue, we generated 321 million, a 26% growth vis-a-vis the second quarter of last year. Now, this quarter, differently from the second quarter of last year, did not have materiality in terms of the property results for investment. With this, I would like to give the floor to Mara to continue on with the presentation. Thank you, Tiago. In the ESG initiatives, environmental, social, and governance, I would like to highlight some in the environmental part. We're recomposing the greenery of the projects that we develop. We recompose all the flora and fauna, and we have almost 5 million square meters of environmental preservation. In the social part, we continue to have partnerships that are strengthened, and we have a diversity committee. After the inclusion program, we created a committee to have a more inclusive and diverse working group. Now, the work of women is a highlight. Most of the holding is made up of women, as well as the statutory board. In governance, we have 75% of the members in the board that are independent, and seven advisory committees, and these members are part of all the committees. We also have a fiscal committee, which means we have a very robust governance. This second quarter, we concluded the diagnosis of our business sustainability. We have the materiality that is concluded within ESG, and the next step is to set forth long-term goals for the company's strategic guidance in this field. Next slide, please. And finally, based on everything that has been said by each business and the consolidated results, we do have some highlights of the business. Once again, based on the results presented, net revenue and gross profit very similar. Net revenue with an increase of 162% vis-a-vis the same quarter. Gross profit 165.3, EBITDA 158%, and net income 26.5% vis-a-vis the second quarter 20. In real estate development, we had the pre-launch of Boa Vista Estates. This is the third development and a growth with sales in malls. We have already spoken about this, a gradual growth with a good May, June better than May, and July better than the two previous months. In retail and digital, and expressive growth through both national and international brands, and a growth in digital platforms with a very significant growth of 661% of gross revenue. In hospitality and gastronomy, the highlight is for leisure hotels. We now no longer have restrictions, and the opening of Hotel Fasano, Fifth Avenue in New York. In the airport, the highlight was the internationalization. The airport can offer full services. And finally, we paid out dividends in April in the second quarter of 144.4 million reais. And in the last 12 months, the payout is 245.4 million paid out to shareholders. With this, I would like to conclude the presentation. We will leave with you the QR codes that we have for partnerships. Simply turn on your cameras and your cell phones. Bring your camera close to the QR code, and if you wish to donate to any action, please identify yourselves. In the meantime, we will pull your questions. Should you have any question in the MIZQ, click on question to the speaker. Thank you. Very well, Tiago, are you ready for the questions? Okay, Mara. I was here making a donation. Wonderful. That's what the Q codes are for. And congratulations for that initiative. I have had feedback from other investor IROs who are going to begin to use this. The question, if we have a forecast for the fourth development of Boa Vista, the land was purchased in June. Not yet, but as soon as we have news, as we did with the estates, you will be the first to hear about this, both shareholders and the market as a whole. We will offer you more information on the project. We have two more questions referring to inflation and the cost of inputs. Which is our outlook, and in which business lines this has had an impact or not. Very generally, we have followed up on this in some of our raw material or inputs. We observe a growth in cost, and we have been able to transfer this to price or through the indexation of accounts receivable, which is something that happens a great deal in real estate developments, or adjusting prices when it comes to gastronomy. We have a question here that I think you already mentioned. In the second quarter, we had a sales performance for leases and in restaurants and hotels that are better than in 2019. The question is, how do we consider these indicators for July, flow and volume of sales? Well, when it comes to sales volume, we have had a sequence of months of improvement. May being better than April, June being better than May, and July being better than June, with an increase in the sales volume. And I think the same will apply to restaurants. The first referred to malls, and there seems to be a more significant recovery of business hotels. Very good. And they would like you to explain so much more about the launch of the estates. What is it about? And they asked again about the fourth project. The Boa Vista Estates is the third project of JHSF in the Boa Vista complex. It was developed with land that begin with 20,000 square meters, what we used to call in the Fazenda Boa Vista as an estancia. It is a product with less square meters in the development. This is the most exclusive development among the three that have been launched by JHFS in the Boa Vista region. uh, in terms of the resumption of sales of store owners and the sales of our malls, if this was in the luxury segment or does it apply to all the segments? Is there one segment with a better performance than another? And once again, a question about July and August. The service sector within the malls is still showing a performance that is somewhat below, especially when it comes to international brands that are at the other end. This is a piece that is growing very strongly, more than the average. So we have two different extremes. The cinemas, the sports academies are suffering more, but it's very simple. We understand the reason. It refers to the existence of restrictions in terms of operating schedules and the use of their capacity. While at the other end, in the luxury brands, we observe a truly excellent performance. Outstanding. In our Catarina complex, the question is about the expansion of the outlet and if we have an outlook for a launch and the sales of the Catarina outlet. Thank you, Mara. When it comes to the Catarina outlet, we already have work underway. We are quite confident in terms of the sequence of the development of the Catarina fashion outlet. For those who do not know it, it is the largest and the best fashion outlet in Brazil. Part of that strong growth that we have observed in sales, in the sale of malls, is perhaps anchored by the Catarina outlet as well as the Cidade Jardim Mall. So we're quite confident in terms of the physical expansion of these two assets, which is what we're doing at present, not only expanding the Catarina outlet, but also expanding the Cidade Jardim Mall. When it comes to Catarina Town, we are well advanced in terms of the development of the master plan. We have held frequent meetings with the architectural offices that we contracted that are working on the master plan. And very soon we hope to have some novelties in terms of the progress of this project. Thank you, Tiago. In terms of the village, we spoke in the release that we push back the launch. And the question is, if we continue with this pace, Can we speed up the future stages? And which is the last stage that has already been launched? We have a forecast for the village of 8 phases. The initial plan was to launch each of the phases with an 18-month interval between them. We have already launched 3 phases in a period that is lower than 24 months, which means we're ahead of our initial planning. And whenever we realize that there's space for this, we're going to speed up the launch of phases. If we perceive that there are negative movements, of course, we will slow down. It's interesting to work with developments in a phase way because they allow you greater flexibility to work with the launch according to market conditions. We have a last question here. And we can close with this question. A question about the financial strategy. If in our financial investments we have some sort of hedge because of the increase of Selic, the answer is yes. Most of the company cash is associated with a post-fixed rate, the CDI, and of course, this offers us quite a bit of tranquility because of the mismatch between the cash applied and a significant part of our indebtedness. I would like to remind all of you that besides the company's cash position that is protected, thanks to this, our accounts receivable is also indexed to the INCC performa, which means we do have protection for the cost of development and inflation. And in our A performa portfolio, and you should look at the release, you will be able to see that this receivables account is based on the IGPM, IPCA, and in some cases, a prefix rate or the CDI itself. So we don't see any significant mismatch between the indices of the company's liabilities with the indices used for the assets of the company. Another question that I deem to be interesting that we did not have in the Q&A. What is happening to the demand of new landing strips in the airport with the internationalization? As soon as we had the internationalization formalized, we saw a very rapid movement of clients who had their aircrafts. Uh, well, Tiago reconnects very well. He has reconnected. A very quick problem. Once, once again, a drop in connection. As soon as we had internationalization, we had a minor idle capacity, and we now have a heated sale. And so the second semester, we will once again proceed to building new hangars. We can absorb 15 or 20 aircrafts additionally. Therefore, we will have another expansion very soon. That was the last question as well. I'm not sure Tiago will be able to connect again. If he does not connect, we would like to thank all of you for your participation. Once again, the IR site is at your entire disposal. We have all of the material available for you. Should you have any doubts, you can hear the replay on YouTube or on the site. If you continue to have doubts, please send your email to jhfs.com.r/ir or contact us through the telephone at 011 3772 5473, JHFS 7453, and an invitation to visit our YouTube page. For those who are not listening to us through YouTube, we have a YouTube channel with a playlist, JHFS Participações. And once again, thank you for your participation. Tiago has connected again. I was just speaking about the IR channels. I I do apologize. This does happen in uh, I did have a technical problem, but I'm sure Mara was able to convey to you the closing remarks, the airport project, and on my behalf and on behalf of the JHFS management, our special thanks to our team of associates for the exceptional work they have carried out for another quarter. Our thanks to the clients for the support they give to the company, and to our business partners with which we are extremely satisfied when we see the significant recovery of their sales and the gradual resumption of their business. I wish you a great deal of health. Please keep safe. And I hope that the situation in the country continues to advance in a sustainable way. Uh, and well, my greetings, my virtual greetings to everybody. Thank you very much.